Alternative Energy Committee, a meeting. We are being recorded. We are starting our meeting at 7:36 p.m. on May 13th, 2020. And Mary Jo has just joined us. Hi, Mary Jo. We have just adjourned. We have just started the meeting. Is there somebody who could take the notes for the meeting minutes?
I'll take some notes.
Yep, so Tanya, so this entire Zoom meeting's recorded and this acts as the meeting minutes because they have to be verbatim. So at the end of the meeting, I'm happy to send this back to you so you have the entire audio and video of it.
Okay, you know, Patricia, if that would be helpful for you, or if you want to take notes along the way, that would be great. We tend to have action items, which I think helps us all keep going forward.
All right.
Okay, thank you. So we have a set of written minutes from our last meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review those? Actually, before we start, why don't we go around and introduce ourselves for the purpose of anybody who's listening in on the audience. And if you are part of the Alternative Energy Committee, please make a note of that because we have two members of our Microgrid Subcommittee, Carrie Thompson, who is from the Board of Selectmen, joining us, as well as Michelle Leary, who is our town liaison. So Michelle, do you want to start and then we'll go around? All right, I'll start. So Tanya Bodell, I am the chair of the Alternative Energy Committee and a resident of Cohasset, obviously.
Okay, so I'm Michelle Leary. I am the Procurement and Contracts Manager at Town Hall.
Great. Mike Schmidt.
Mike Schmidt, member of the Alternative Energy Committee.
Steve.
Hi, I'm a member of the Alternative Energy Committee and chair of the Electricity Aggregation Subcommittee.
Thank you. Mary Jo Larson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Jo Larson on the Alternative Energy Committee.
Great. Bill Fusco.
Hi, I'm Bill Fusco. I am a member of the Alternative Energy Committee.
Great. Patricia.
Patricia Gooding, Vice Chair, AEC.
Tyler.
I'm Tyler Tebow. I'm a member of the Microgrid Subcommittee, resident of Cohasset.
Steve Girardi.
Steve, you're in the dark.
You're in the dark and you're also on mute.
So I'm Steve Girardi, former AEC chair on the Microgrid Subcommittee, and I just want to throw it out there, I'm running for Water Commission.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Carrie.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Carrie Thompson, select woman. Happy to be here. Happy to listen and see how I can help and how we can help as a board.
Okay, that is great. Thank you very much. All right. So let's move to the minutes from our last meeting. Those were circulated in advance. Has everybody had a chance to review those minutes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And do I have a motion to, is there any discussion or comments or questions?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any final discussion? All in favor to approve the minutes from our last meeting, say aye. Actually, sorry. We have to do a roll call vote because we are being recorded and we are all remote. So this is Tanya Bodell and I say aye to approve the minutes. Mike?
Mike Schmidt, I second the motion to approve the minutes.
And now you have to vote to say aye or nay to approve.
I vote aye.
Thank you. Steve Wenner.
Steve Wenner, aye.
Mary Jo.
Aye.
Bill Fusco.
Aye.
Patricia Gooding. So you have to say your name and say aye.
Patricia Gooding, aye.
All right. Very good. Is that good enough, Michelle? I know not everybody's names.
We
But
can only vote if we were present, right? I don't think Bill was present for the meeting.
that's right. Bill, you were not. So would you like to abstain?
I will abstain.
All right. Thank you, Bill. So say Bill Fusco, I abstain.
Bill Fusco, I abstain.
All right, very good. So the motion has been approved to accept the minutes from our last meeting. Thank you very much for everything on that. So those now approved, and we will submit them for posting on the website. The first item to discuss is an update on the town hall renovation. And I think, Michelle, you were going to do that. And Mary Jo, you're our liaison along with Patricia on that. So why don't we start with Michelle, and then if Joe or Patricia would like to contribute, you may as well. Thank you.
Okay, so the Town Hall Building Committee has been meeting for quite some time now. We have completed a couple of phases so far. We've hired the owner's project manager. They presented at the original Board of Selectmen's meeting back in late January, where we got additional direction from the Board of Selectmen as to, you know, a dollar value that they'd like to see us stay with for the new building. So after that presentation, we as a group decided that it was time to maybe contract with another OPM firm to get us to the next level, someone that really understood our needs, which were, you know, the energy efficiencies, which is really number one on Paul Schubert's list. He made sure that that was a primary focus of ours. And we also needed someone to think economically for us, because we can't just build this grandiose building without keeping in mind the cost. So we contracted with another OPM service. And then we went out to RFQ for architects. We have chosen an architect, and primarily we chose this architect because their vision was, it was simplistic. It was, you can get much more for much less. And they have, they specialize in energy conservation. So they showed us some design concepts. They've done historic town halls. So it really was just a great fit. So we went to CPC and asked for some funding there to get us through to the next phase, which would be schematic design. And if fall town meeting, we're hoping to present to the community a schematic design that we think would work.
Michelle, just question. This is
Sure.
Paxton.
Yep.
Do you have the funding to proceed now?
So we don't have all the funding. That will depend on the CPC article moving forward at annual town meeting. We asked for $200,000 from CPC for the project in total. We are hoping to be able to spend $75,000 of that $200,000 to get us through to fall town meeting.
Thank you.
And Michelle, is this pandemic, is this crisis affecting your timeline for moving forward?
It is and it isn't. So we're taking into consideration all that's going on in the world, and really the economies, that the revenue hits that we may take due to lack of revenue due to taxes, and just the economic times as a whole. So what we decided to do was slow the project down. Before we were going to go to fall town meeting and ask for, we were going to push for the architects to have a complete design and have construction documents ready to go in the fall. So we're slowing the whole project down just to make sure we're mindful of, you know, the current state of the economy and what's happening. But by moving forward just to the schematic design phase, we feel as though we're not going to lose anything. We'll still have something tangible in hand. If in fact at fall town meeting it's not the right time to move forward, then we can still hold off until annual. So we're moving slowly, and we're being very mindful and smart about the entire, you know, pandemic and what's happening. And we just want to make sure we're doing the right thing by the residents and the community as a whole.
Just one other comment, Tanya, if that's okay. So, there are actually members of the Town Hall Building Committee who have done a lot of research on geothermal. And so the request from this committee is, you know, please hold off in terms of pushing really hard on these energy alternatives. But from what I understand, Michelle, actually at some point there is an interest in actually having a presentation about geothermal when the timing is right. Could you just comment on that?
Yep. So we are actually going to speak with the architect on Friday because we really haven't had any initial marching orders for them. So we want to talk about programming, and we do want to talk about geothermal. Brian Host, who is on the Capital Budget Committee, has a wealth of knowledge about geothermal. He's done a lot of research on it. We lean on him at times to help us through it, but we do want to learn about it. The OPM is very much aware that that is a priority for us. Paul Schubert has indicated it's a priority, so it's high on the list.
Okay, thanks so much.
Sure.
Great. Are there any other questions for Michelle on the renovation of the town hall? All right, very good. Michelle, thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle.
All right, the next topic is the community aggregation update. And Steve, could you take the lead in reporting on behalf of the subcommittee where that stands?
Okay, I had a message from John O'Rourke today, and he tells me that the Mass DPU is really not doing anything now because of the COVID crisis. He assured me that he'll let me know as soon as he has any news about how they're proceeding with our application. Other than that, not much to report. I guess you saw the article I wrote that's in the Life on the Rocks publication. So
That was great.
That was great. So as far as the warrant in the town meeting, where are we on that? I know advisory committee has voted on it and approved the recommendation to pursue the plan. And I believe that the Board of Selectmen also have voted on that and approved pursuit of the community aggregation plan. And so we are now just waiting for the town meeting, which I think has been changing dates. And then at the end of the Board of Selectmen meeting last night was potentially being discussed as being deferred, not indefinitely, but at least for a while. So Carrie, do you want to get on that?
And this is a tough decision because we understand the importance of preserving our democracy. And, you know, our town meetings, they're not representative town meetings like certain other towns have. They are town meetings where every citizen is, you know, invited to come. So we understand the importance of that and maintaining that, but we're also trying to do it in a safe way. The problem right now is that technically we still have it scheduled for June. I believe the current date right now is June 15th or 16th.
16th,
I'll double check the reason. Yeah, no, you're right. At one point it was the 15th. The reason for that is because of the FEMA deadlines, and every town right now on the coast technically has to vote on that one warrant article, or we have the potential to lose FEMA stuff, which could affect flood insurance and everything. So that's one thing we're dealing with, because there is a possibility that FEMA and the federal government might extend those. And if that's the case, it would probably be easier to postpone town meeting, maybe till July or August. But we're trying to explore options. Right now, it's not legal to have a virtual town meeting, and logistically that's complicated, as you all know. The legislature in Massachusetts is open to possibly changing that, though, so that's one option. Last night, people are trying to get creative. They proposed the possible, like, drive-in movie type option where people come to town meeting in their cars, maybe in the lot of the music circus, and figuring out a way to have people still vote by being in their cars if they feel safer. I know, it's trying to be creative, but we don't know. We've thought about doing one outside, maybe on one of the athletic fields, so people can be separated. I just I want you all to know that we're struggling with how to do this safely and how to do it responsibly for the town, and no one really has any answers yet, but things are changing and they're fluid. So I would love any, advice or thoughts that you have on that, because we are worried about it, but we're kind of in a hard spot right now, needing to have something in June because of FEMA.
On the drive-in town.
Yeah.
Is there anything that prevent that? I mean, I can see voting by either honking your horn or flashing your light.
Yeah, we thought about that, or having some people maybe out collecting votes in a way that's safe. It is something we could try.
Mhm.
I don't know how people are going to feel about that, but we could
raise
try
the
it.
flag.
There you go, Mary Jo. Yeah. I mean, and here's the problem. A lot of times our attendance at town meeting often skews to a little bit older of a population, which is not good. I mean, younger people should be attending, but we don't want to put anyone at risk. And I genuinely would want to hear how all of you would feel about maybe coming to a town meeting, maybe if we're separated, on a field somewhere outdoors. Would you like the drive-in idea? Would you rather try to wait till July or August?
Carrie,
we don't know. Hi, Steve.
I'm wondering, have the town managers been petitioning and lobbying the governor and the legislature to try to allow for a virtual town meeting?
Yes, there actually was a committee meeting in the legislature today to discuss virtual voting. They literally just started doing that themselves last week, our Mass legislature, so it's very new to all of them, but they did just start that, and that is under consideration right now to make that change to allow us to do it virtually. I don't know how people are going to feel about that, though. Would you all be open to that option if it is possible?
I think it'd be fine.
Okay. I mean, if Congress is doing it, if our legislature is doing it, I don't see why we shouldn't be able to do it at a more local level. I just, people are getting more comfortable with things like Zoom. So, but that is a law. The legislature would have to make a vote on that to allow us to do it.
Would they, this is Pat Gooding speaking, would they have to approve if you did something that was outdoors?
No, we would be allowed to do that ourselves without approval. Anything in person is fine right now, even if it means we're in our cars, that would still count as in person. So anything we do outside, we could proceed with ourselves and make decisions about that. But the virtual option, again, this is all happening day by day. So they haven't officially voted on it, but it could be something under consideration. If we want to start lobbying our legislators to go for that, that's something I can start doing for us too. I mean, I'm for it, but I think they're all just trying to figure out if other towns want that as well.
I know Hull just scheduled their annual town meeting outside on the new field outside of the high school.
Yeah. And again, it's probably for the same reason. They have the FEMA deadlines up against them too. The towns that aren't worried about the FEMA stuff have actually started scheduling for July and August to make it a little later, but that's interesting that Hull already decided that. The other option too is that we could reduce our quorum. I'm hesitant about that though, because as you know, we have to have, I believe it's 100 people at our town meeting quorum-wise to make votes. So we could cut that, but I struggle with that decision because I do feel like that's stifling the democratic process a little bit too, even if it might be safer. So we're wrestling with this. Stay tuned. I'll keep you updated. Things are changing by the day.
Okay, well, we are prepared to participate however you need us, whether it's virtually or from our cars or at a field. Just put into context, potentially, we have for sure the community aggregation warrant that even his committee have been working on, that he just gave an update on. And that, given where the DPU is, if that gets delayed, it's fine. And second set of potential warrants that was raised last night at the Board of Select meeting was related to potentially asking the town to approve leases for a number of sites in the town to be used for either solar and or microgrids. And so we'll be giving more background on that on this call, as well as potential language that we've looked at by compiling information on the warrants from prior years. And we are in the process of working with the town council on that. So we'll give an update on that in a little bit. So thank you for all you do and for making this happen, but we're here to do whatever you need us to do.
You all are the best. I love the energy of your committee, literally and figuratively.
Yes, we have alternative energy for
You
sure.
do. You have traditional and alternative energy.
That's right. That's right. All right, great. So now we are moving on to a very meaty part of our call. And this is a report from the subcommittee. And we have the 3 members plus myself of the subcommittee. So the subcommittee, the Microgrid Subcommittee is myself, Tanya Bodell, it's Mike Schmidt, Steve Girardi, and Tyler Thibault. And let me tell you, we have a rock star team. Mike, Steve, and Tyler all work for utilities, the electrical engineering aspects, as well as the knowledge about the actual operations of utility, how it works, is critical. The microgrid itself is part of a larger context. And again, this is just to remind the audience that might be watching this later to provide the context. When this committee went before the Board of Selectmen in November to talk about priorities for 2020, the priority that was given to us was resiliency and reliability. How do we help everyone in the town have power when they need it? We will talk about why we have so many outages in this town. We have done a lot of research on our subcommittee, pulling up data from National Grid to try to understand what the problem is and then what could solve it. And there were initially 2 approaches. We are going to pursue more information about both approaches. One is to look at a microgrid concept for better resiliency, reliability. We'll expand upon that. The other, which is not necessarily off the table, but has not been a focus of our research yet, is having Cohasset become an electric municipal light company. As a municipal electric light company, Cohasset would control assets in the distribution wires. The town would have to purchase those wires on the distribution system at full replacement cost from National Grid. That's required by law, so it could be very expensive. We've not pursued that yet. If we were to do that, we'd be able to get help from Hull and Hingham, and there could be some benefits from that. But there are also some costs, and this, either the Microgrid Subcommittee or another subcommittee will thoroughly look into that. The Microgrid Subcommittee has been pursuing what the new advances in technology looks like and whether that might provide the solution. And so the report that we're about to give is from the Microgrid Subcommittee. It was developed in the context of this reliability and resiliency goal that the Board of Selectmen gave us. And it's also been consistent with work that Michelle has been doing with our committee to pursue grants. The concept of microgrids, which we'll talk about what that means, is that you can create like a mini system within a larger system. A microgrid, we're using 4 terms. A microgrid could be what people in Cohasset already have, backup generation that powers their home when the lights go down. It could be a combination of a gas backup generator plus a power wall from Tesla, plus potentially your electric vehicle going forward, where you're able to self-sustain by pulling yourself off the grid or islanding off the grid. And that's what we're calling a microgrid. The next step of a microgrid would be to have multiple microgrids, each being able to pull off of the system and maintain their own energy. The Microgrid Subcommittee looked at 2 potential sites as a starting point. We've requested from the Mass CEC 2 study grants of $75,000 each. We're very hopeful we will get at least one of those, ideally both. And those 2 microgrids we will talk about in this presentation. And then we are talking about mini grids. Mini grids would be a connection that would allow us to wire together the microgrids. That's currently not allowed because National Grid has a franchise right, a monopoly right over the town. But if there was a way to put wires on town land without crossing a public right of way, we could do that. And then the fourth step would be a muni grid, and that would be a town-wide muni grid where the town itself could, with 3 switches, that's all it would take, island the town off of the national grid system and be able to self-support or sustain with energy that we produce and are able to distribute. Ideally, that would be clean energy. It would be solar panels. It would be battery storage. It would be a combination of things that would allow us to have a low impact on the environment and not rely on gas pipelines, not rely on delivery of diesel fuel, because that creates a risk. But that's the broad picture of what we're talking about. I'm going to share my screen because I find that pictures are better than words. And again, I thank everybody for your patience as we go through this. But I wanted to provide some context with respect to what we're about to talk about. All right, so I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to try to find the...
Where do you look for that? I mean, where are you looking?
I'm looking, do you see me looking? I'm looking on my computer.
Oh, no, but there's a green thing that says share screen. Okay, okay.
Yeah, that's at the bottom. So let me go to the beginning. All right. This is a draft for internal discussion only, but it has been distributed to a number of folks who have expertise in this area, mainly to socialize it. But this is the first time the Microgrid Subcommittee is formally presenting it to the Alternative Energy Committee. The hope is that at the end of this, the Alternative Energy Committee would vote to accept this proposed plan, and that would give us some legitimacy for then starting to socialize it even further by presenting it to different committees in the town. So that's the objective at the end of this. I'm going to go a little bit faster because I know people who subsequently watch this can slow things down as needed, but I'm about to start walking through our proposed conceptual framework for improving Cohasset's electric power reliability and resiliency with a microgrid approach. All right, so we're first going to talk about the statement of issue. I think this will be very informative to people who have had to suffer through outages over the past couple of weeks. Why do these happen all the time? And then we'll talk about the difference between reliability and resiliency. And then we'll talk about a conceptual framework or implementation plan, and then next steps. All right. So the first thing is, as we know, Cohasset has some significant reliability and resiliency issues. We're situated in a location, as you'll see, that is at the end of National Grid service territory. So National Grid is servicing New York and Long Island, as well as Massachusetts and other parts of New England. Cohasset is right here at the edge. National Grid supplies us with both gas and electricity. That's actually helpful because our gas is coming from National Grid, our power is coming from National Grid. So there may be some incentives for National Grid to support a microgrid because they're also providing us with the natural gas. Cohasset's far away from the high voltage backbone. So if you look at these lines, these dark blue lines are the high voltage transmission system. Operated by ISO New England. Cohasset is all the way out here. So in order for us to get energy, we have to have a long feeder line that comes off of, it's not a feeder line. I know my electrical engineers are going to correct me on this, but it's a longer line that has to come off of the high voltage transmission system and then deliver energy through Hanover, through Norwell, through Scituate into Cohasset. This is another representation of where it has to come from, Auburn Street, all the way through these different towns. There's then a connection in Norwell that feeds a line that goes through Wampatuck Park. That is a big part of the problem. That line through Wampatuck Park supplies us with 75% of our energy. and then there's another line that goes through Situate. And if something happens in Situate, that the line goes down, a tree in Situate falls down, we feel it. If a tree in Norwell falls down, we feel it. A tree in Wampatuck Park goes down. If anything happens along the way, we will be without energy. And furthermore, we won't get energy until all of those upstream problems are fixed. This is another representation of how we're at the end of National Grid's line and some of the problems in between when the energy comes to us. And lots of outages happen. What this chart is showing is the lines. We basically are serviced off of two lines, one coming in through Situate, one coming in through Wampatuck Park. And those two lines tend to have outages quite frequently. The primary feeder, as we've already said, runs through the heavily wooded area. It's fairly exposed and it's not necessarily readily accessible, which creates some of our delays. And we also cannot get help from the town of Hull or Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant because there are some limitations on that. And so I don't know, Mike and Steve, if you want to talk about some of those limitations, why you can't help Cohasset, because I know that's one of the frustrations. National Grid does a good job of coming to help us, but the municipalities can help each other. They can't come help us.
That's a lot of that's due to the fact that there's we have mutual aid agreements with our own municipal light plants, not with the investor-owned utilities.
Is there a way to overcome that? Would that require an agreement with National Grid?
In reality, the municipal light plants are going to help each other first. It's like, for instance, Hingham, during that April storm that we had 70-mile-per-hour winds, Braintree rolled 3 bucket trucks to Hingham to help us out and restored our people very quickly. They knocked off 6 hours of work time for us. So, and if I remember, the municipal light plant covers, I think, a quarter or near half of the, I think it's a quarter of the population of Massachusetts of energy buyers. So the municipal light plants do cover a vast majority of Massachusetts, like Taunton, Braintree, Hull, Hingham, Reading, etc. There's 42 light plants in New England.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, another part of that, municipal light plant can only service its ratepayers. Those agreements between municipal light plants were kind of developed so that Hingham could help Hull, but it's never happened that a municipal light plant has helped an investor-owned utility. They usually have contractors help them before they'd never use a municipal light plant.
Okay. So we are looking at whether or not there's some potential for help there, but as you've heard, there's reasons, legacy reasons, but also potentially other reasons why it might not be the best approach. Obviously, if we were a municipal electric light company, that would be different, and that would be a plus reason to do that. But without that, we still may not get the direct assistance. And even if we did, it wouldn't necessarily bring the lights back on, because if there's a problem upstream, we can't get the power. So that's one of, again, a negative on becoming an electric light company, although we get the help of our neighbors. If the problem is in Wampatuck or Norwell or on the line coming into Cohasset, it's going to be more of a problem. So are we imagining how bad it is? I think we all take for granted you need a generator, that the town, who has 14 backup generators, the town has 14 backup generators, 5 that are leased and 9 on site. That's not normal for a developed country. Are we imagining this? The answer is no. We looked at National Grid, some of the typical metrics used to measure how our 2 feeder lines that come into the town compare to the nation averages, as well as to National Grid system. And what we found is we are way, way worse than average. Now, the averages take into account the good lines as well as the bad lines. So if we think we're bad, we're really bad. This is how bad we are. Outage duration. The Norwell substation and King Street distribution lines were ranked out of National Grid's 1,162 feeders and circuits were ranked 2nd and 4th as having the longest average outage duration.
And I could speak to that.
Yep, please.
My generator, 2 years old. That's how many, I have actually 123 run hours. So that's a lot of outage hours in 2 years.
That is, so 50, basically 50 some hours a year.
Pretty much.
Yeah, and Steve is at the end of the line. He's at the end on Hull Street. So the outage duration is really bad. The number of outages is also really bad. 2018 was a very bad year for Cohasset and for New England, but the average in North America was 1.5 hours per year in 2018. Cohasset had 25 hours of outages. So average was 1.5 hours. For the outages, we had 25 hours. Customer interruptions, those same circuits we talked about are 5th and 6th for the average number of customer interruptions. So we don't just have them, we have them a lot. And specifically, we have about 5 times a year. We have lines that go down versus the utility average nationwide of 1.1 times per year. And then the last is average restoration time. As we've talked about, it takes a while for National Grid to get to us, not because they don't want to get to us, but they've got a lot of other things upstream they need to deal with. And so for Cohasset, the average restoration time was 5 hours in 2018, and an overall average for North American utilities was 1.36 hours. So we are multiples worse than what the rest of the country is experiencing. And a lot of it is just how we're situated and where our energy is coming from, but there's clearly a problem that we need to address. So what's the right way to address it? Well, we talk about reliability and resiliency. And from a industry perspective, resiliency is a buzzword that's become very popular over the last couple of years, especially after Superstorm Sandy. And we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between the two and why microgrids can contribute to both. So we have significant reliability and resiliency issues. Part of it is just where we are, storm surges, the fact that we've got the Atlantic on one side of us. There's also sea level rises that we're concerned about. We have some maps talking about that. And we have a lot of lines going down upstream as well as within the town. So 2 different supply goals that the Board of Selectmen tasked us with. Reliability. Reliability is about not going down to start with. And so it's the ability of the electric system to supply electric power and energy requirements at all times. All times, 100% of the time, is obviously a gold standard. There are other standards that expect you're not going to necessarily do it all the time, but most certainly not reliable is when you go down a lot, 5 times a year, and go down for an average of 5 hours before you get restored. So that's reliability, which is let's not go down at all to start. Then there's resiliency. And resiliency is the ability to respond quickly and recover from a problem. And how quickly can you come back? And if you look at the bottom chart, that illustration of resiliency shows a quick recovery for the blue line. That would be a resilient system. There's a disaster, there's restoration and recovery. It's very quick. Not resilient would be the red, also not reliable, but the red line where you go down and it just takes that much longer to come back up. Cohasset has both reliability and resiliency problems. Here's just some images of why. We have storm systems that center upon us. We have storm surges. We just got a lot of weather. We also live in wooded land. We have some of the most green area per square foot, per square mile, and it means that the trees come down in some of those big storms, and sometimes they take the power lines down with them. This is an actual picture in Cohasset, and I think most of us have seen that at one point or another. So the 13.8 kV lines, which are the large lines coming in through Wampatuck and through Scituate, this is an example. Every year they've gone down, and it's, thousands of people are not being served. But we also have internal to the town problems where the smaller lines within the town also go down on an annual basis. So we need to, if we're going to address the reliability and resiliency, we need to address both of these. We also have sea level. We're near the ocean, and sea level rises create a potential reliability challenge. If we think about where the lines are, this is a map of potential sea level rise of 11 feet. That is an extreme case, but this also shows the pathways of flooding that will occur, and I'll show you a floodway map in a moment. But the lines in the town that feed electricity will potentially be compromised with flooding or sea level rise. And that means that the downtown would have trouble being serviced, as well as the small spur from Situate could have issues as well. And this is a flood map. And so the floodplain again sort of mimics where NOAA thinks the sea level would rise and where the potential problems are with respect to the system. Another way of looking at that same information, the potential compromised lines. And then lastly, this map shows some of the key infrastructure, emergency infrastructure that's at risk in Cohasset. The police and fire department are here. The water, the sewer plant, water treatment plant is here. This is the downtown area. The churches, which could be safe havens, are potentially not going to receive electricity, and so on. Up here on Sawyer Street with the schools 5 and 6, they're higher ground. They have a different electric line that's feeding them. And I think, frankly, that's why our emergency response is situated behind Osgood. And that tends to be one of our safe stations when we have an outage. So that's how we're thinking about this. This map I love. Steve, do you want to talk about this map? Because you created this map in 2016, 4 years ago, driving through town. I guess we combined it with the infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about this and what you were thinking as you put this together?
Okay, so in 2016, I drove around town, and so we looked at it where we can island off the grid, using SCADA control switches. So in an event where the line through Wampatuck or the 13.8 feed from Situate, which also feeds a 4160 line, went down, we could have power for like the town hall, part of the downtown area, some of the residents, so they can kind of gather and still go on about the business if we happen to assume a long outage. And part of it was thinking using the landfill solar and hopefully get some battery storage and some generation to help with the power flow in that area. So it's a very feasible area, and actually keeps the Deer Hill Library, Osgood School open for warming station, the Wilcox Center. It's actually a good little spot for like a mini grid for the town.
So you'll see this when we talk about phase 3, a downtown mini grid. But we would anticipate having multiple mini grids. So if a tree goes down on Jerusalem Road, we could isolate that town system and be able to service the rest. And again, a lot of this can incorporate what some of our citizens already are doing. If there's a chunk of area or neighborhoods that have backup generation, they could come off so that we don't have to size up the system to service everybody. But again, these are things as we get down, get further along, we can start thinking about, as well as some incentives on how to make sure, folks are properly incentivized to do the right thing. So that moves us to, I call it an implementation plan. It's really more of a conceptual framework that we've developed at the Microgrid Subcommittee. And this talks about some of the options that we're looking at. Backup generation, the town already does this. A lot of residents of Cohasset already do this. And we take it for granted that this is what you have to do. Most people in America do not have to have backup generation to make sure that they can work and stay warm and keep the lights on. Building resilience, this is about having maybe some battery storage at your home, solar panels on your roof, a combination of things that would allow your building to be more resilient, but also cleaner. Microgrid solution is wider connectivity, which we'll talk about a 4-phase plan. And then separate and apart, although it could incorporate each of these, is the town electric company. Again, we're not ignoring it. We're just not focused on that right now. So what is a microgrid? I guess Bill or Tyler or Mike, do you want to talk about generally what a microgrid looks like and how it would work?
Yeah, I can talk about it. So like you mentioned earlier, there's multiple kind of designs for microgrids, whether it's just someone's house, the generator or solar panels or a power wall, or you go into even larger where you would have multiple generation sites and multiple customers. I think some of the options we have, you can stay small and supply buildings or customers that are connected close by, so you don't have to go into the public way. Or there's an option, we could probably partner with National Grid, utilize their infrastructure and create more of a town-wide microgrid. But basically the parts are, you have generation, and then you have customers, and they're connected between each other, isolated from a larger grid. That's kind of the basics of it.
That's great. Thank you. And they can be buildings, campuses, or communities. And we're going to talk about sort of a stage plan in exploring this for the town. But it requires partners. And so the Microgrid Subcommittee has been very active in talking to a lot of potential partners. We met with National Grid. National Grid has been very supportive of some of our proposals for study grants to look at microgrid opportunities. We would need to potentially have a third party manage our system, the generation, the storage, as well as potentially lines that connect them. We've talked to Amoresco, we've talked to Palmer Capital about that. And then there's grants and funding that we have been pursuing. And Michelle has been amazing at helping to submit some of those grants. We have just received word that we have a $3,000 study grant to look at potential solar opportunities on town buildings. And there are 2 study grants for what we'll talk about phase 1 to really look in depth at those 2 potential microgrid opportunities funded by the Mass CEC. And then there's some more money, big money, at the Department of Energy and also at some of the state programs, which could be up to $2 million. Some of it has a sharing component where maybe the town has to contribute 25%. Some of it's outright grants. The Department of Energy is very interested in looking at lessons learned from municipalities that try to implement some of these new technologies, and including some very interesting opportunities like electric buses. And so there's a lot of opportunity right now to get money to help the town look at this problem and find solutions for this problem and subsidize investment in this, especially if it's this ideal location like we have, which serves as a perfect demonstration project and a team that would happily be able to share the lessons learned. So that's a great opportunity. That's now. We want to take advantage of that. And then a feasibility plan is something that we have, as a subcommittee, been looking at. That's what we're about to present to you, which is where are the sites that we'd start with and how do we move to, as we call it, a muni grid, a town-wide system that could island off the picture that Steve had talked about that he had charted out 4 years ago, that you could island off the system. So here's our phased approach, and there'd be lessons along the way, and there's some nomenclature that goes with this to try to differentiate between sizes of what we're talking about.
I'm sorry, Tanya, we do have a question from Corey Evans. It's
yes.
313 North Main Street. Have other towns launched microgrids with a national grid as their service provider? And is there a model to follow for this type of cooperation?
So that's a great question, Corey. And I'm going to let Tyler answer what Eversource has been doing. I think Eversource has been doing a lot more than National Grid on the, and what's been happening. I will say the state has funded Judith Judson, who's with Amoresco, and we've been in discussion with her. She's a former commissioner of the Department of Energy Resources. While she was at the Department of Energy Resources, there was funding for microgrids. So we are not in the lead on this. There are lessons learned by other microgrids, and there has been mass CEC funding for potential microgrids, study grants, as well as implementation that has been occurring on campuses. And in addition, a lot of the universities in Massachusetts, as well as the medical centers that we have in Massachusetts, as well as in other parts of New England, already have microgrids. They already have their own self-sustaining backup generation and even their existing plant. But I'll let Tyler talk about what Eversource has been doing with some municipalities, and then sort of put into context where we as a town, Cohasset, stands on the microgrids.
Yes, I'm not 100% sure what National Grid's philosophy is when it comes to microgrids, but I know at Eversource we've been very accommodating to any developers and municipalities that want to try to develop a microgrid. We've worked with a lot of the developers, that are working through Mass CEC, and all different flavors of microgrids. Some small where it's just 2 buildings, some where it's college, university, and they want to bring in another school, like a municipal school, and then the fire department, and some housing. We're also involved in Cape Cod building battery storage at the down in Provincetown right now to help with kind of similar thing where you have almost like a dead end, and you have the lines that feed Provincetown, and if you lose those, you got the ocean surrounding you, so there's no other option. So we're building a large battery storage facility there that would power Provincetown, for a certain amount of time, depending on the load. But we're also trying to develop some other ones like in the Seaport area, and bring in different customers. But our main philosophy is we want to be a part of it. We want the microgrid to utilize our infrastructure in the street. We want to maintain ownership of that infrastructure, and we want to be the operator of the microgrid. So our philosophy is that the customers would supply the generation, and Eversource would, be in charge of dispatching that generation, say on a blue sky day, to load shed, or if there was an outage from the substation or the lines, it would be Eversource that would, operate that switching to basically turn on the microgrid and energize the customers. So that's kind of some of the stuff we're working on. And, some of the, I guess, the sticking points that, upper leadership in my company is working on is, rate structure and that whole owner, who's going to own it, who's going to operate it. But I think that's kind of where we're headed. So that's why, I'm not sure National Grid is, but, I think the more that we partner with them, I think the better it will be to get this microgrid to be successful.
Yeah, I'll make a point on that, and then Steve or Mike, if you want to talk about the storage investments that your towns are making, or some of the wires alternative ways of approaching your reliability you're looking at. I think those are neighbors that are taking this in their own hands. They're electric light companies, but it provides some lessons learned as well. I will say we are working with National Grid very closely. That's the only way this is going to happen. National Grid has been very helpful. I think they might be a little bit behind Eversource on thinking about business model and what they want to do and how to do it, but they most certainly understand our concerns and our issues and want to work with us, but they're going to look at traditional solutions first. They're going to look at tree trimming. They're going to look at other ways that they might be able to improve our reliability before they start moving into a new business model at this point. But I think that's changing. We have to skate towards the puck, and then the advancing technology makes that more realistic. And talking about advancing technology. I don't know how much Steve and Mike can share, but if either of you want to talk about something that your company is doing, that would be great.
So I just want to add one thing, and obviously Tyler can correct me, but I think, from the trained eye, Eversource is, I think, more advanced in the feeder automation via their SCADA controls systems versus National Grid. And you go to an Eversource territory, they have control of their distribution system on the switch level, where I haven't seen many in the National Grid area. So I think Eversource is far ahead. Tyler, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but you could see it just driving around their territory. It's a little more advanced.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I don't have an idea of what National Grid has for SCADA automation, but I know we're at the end of completing a 3-year grid modernization program, and I think we've installed over 200 overhead automated switches in Massachusetts, as well as maybe 100 underground switches, automated pad mount switches. I'm personally working on a 4 kV underground automation program. So we are working on a lot of automation, as well as working on a grid mod 2.0 with like a control room of the future, where we'll have a whole distribution management system. So we are really digging into the technology.
Steve Wenner raised his hand. Steve, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious. What do the utilities, National Grid or Eversource, get out of this sort of thing, microgrid projects? Is there some revenue advantage to them, or is it just balancing the grid better, or what?
I think it's a combination of many things. One, it helps us to decrease or rely on larger transmission and larger generation. If we have a heavily loaded area, instead of bringing in a new transmission line, and we can create a microgrid, that would keep us from having to build a new substation, as well as, or maybe reconductoring a whole line. We can develop a microgrid, and that helps with the reliability. As for rates, that's one thing I think we're working on. I don't think anyone has any idea of, if this would be additional costs or how that would work at this point. It also just helps advance technology, so I think that's, some of the things we're really working on. And, again, we're really striving to provide excellent customer service. And I think by having a microgrid and working with the customers and improving that resiliency and reliability, I think it definitely improves customer satisfaction significantly.
Great.
Yeah, I attended a presentation by people from, I believe it was Chelsea, who were trying to put in a microgrid, and they didn't. They said they weren't getting real good cooperation from Eversource on that. But so I'm a little bit.
Steve, why would you bring that up when we've got somebody from Eversource here?
I think I know which one you're talking about. And that was, I think, one of the ones through Mass CEC. And there are a bunch of ones that went through Mass CEC, and we provided as much support as we could for a lot of them. And I think that one it seemed to be more of a virtual microgrid, where
yes, right, it was a virtual microgrid.
Yeah, so they weren't even really going to be connected per se. They were just going to turn on and off their generation based on different loading conditions. So it was a little unique. And I'm not, I think
they seem to be saying, though, the reason they opted for a virtual sort of microgrid was they couldn't figure out how to work with Eversource and getting the normal sort of thing, using the
switches,
transition lines around distribution lines.
Yeah, that's one of the tough parts. I think a lot of the microgrids that came forth in Mass CEC, they didn't understand kind of how our distribution system works. And the biggest sticking point was, they had an idea of connecting their infrastructure together, but they didn't understand that, well, we still need to operate this on a blue sky day. We still need to provide the power. And that's why, the options to maintain that blue sky infrastructure. That's why we think it's best for the microgrids to utilize our infrastructure during a microgrid operation, because then you aren't duplicating basically the same infrastructure. And that was one of I think a lot of the problems of a lot of the microgrids that came forth through Mass CEC.
Yeah, so that's actually a good lead in to why we phased in a microgrid approach conceptually, because of the business model that hasn't been fully developed yet, because of the rules around who gets to control the existing distribution system, rules about whether or not somebody else could build wires without imposing on the franchise rights of the utility. And then also the tariffs. What's in it for Eversource and National Grid if they take their assets and allow a town to use them or a third party to operate them? And what does that mean with respect to the rest of their system? Who pays for that? So I think those are lessons that need to be approached. It hasn't been developed yet. We are ahead of the curve, but it's coming towards us very quickly. And so the proposed approach is a phased approach, 4 phases, where we start with a demonstration project that does not cross any rights of way. 2 projects we'll talk about in a moment. The second phase is looking at additional microgrids. If that first phase works, that we would look at additional spots in town, public, as well as public-private partnerships, possibly even private, where we would look at, for example, Shaw's or Stop and Shop. If they have their own microgrid in those shopping centers and can pull that load off the system and be self-sustaining, as well as being able to supply their energy with batteries and renewables, that makes more economic sense to them. It's very helpful to the town because we don't have to build the generation and the support to be able to feed them energy. So there's potential places where the large load can make a major contribution. I think the sports center, the sports complex, and the medical center, which are right next to each other, that's another example. The transportation district, if we had a combination of canopies at the Mbta Station, helping to service the load at the 3A shopping area, that could be a very valuable way to help us save costs as we're servicing the rest of the grid, are most vulnerable, who don't have those options. So it's a multiple staged approach. We start with 2 demonstration projects. We then move to looking at other microgrids in the system. We connect what we had already shown you that Steve developed 4 years ago, and it still remains a great opportunity to this day, potential mini grid that would have to cross public rights away and would definitely require the cooperation of National Grid, as all of this does. But this is where we get into what Tyler was talking about, who controls the wire, who operates them, how does it work? And then if we can crack that nut, we can look at having a municipal-wide muni grid, but it might have 6 or 7 mini grids that have wires or control agreements that cross public rights away. So we wanted to start small. There's no way to take a big bite of that muni grid, even though that's our ultimate goal. We want to start small with the demonstration projects. And I'll talk through just quickly each of these stages. So the first phase, initial microgrid projects, these are public entities. This is where Michelle Leary was amazing in helping us put this together for the Mass CEC. The 2 projects are pillars of what could be our downtown mini grid if we're able to get to a phase 3. And those 2 projects include the DPW transfer station, where the town of Cohasset already has a solar energy array that we purchase our energy from. And then the second would be the Elm Street microgrid project. And that would look at police, fire, and a teaming arrangement, potentially if there are economies of scale, with Harborview. Harborview has 64 units of elderly and people with physical challenges and other disabilities. And so they're most vulnerable. They use one of the town's 5 leased diesel generators for backup power. It only heats up the common area. So when there's an outage, those residents have cold homes, dark homes, and they can come to the common area to make a cup of coffee, to charge their phone, and then they need to go back. It's not a good situation, but it is contiguous to the police and fire department without crossing a public right of way. So there's an opportunity to have a nice microgrid there. These are two projects that we have requested from the Mass CEC funding to do a study grant for both of them. And we're hopeful that we might be able to get some of that funding to be able to explore in more detail what a microgrid at those two locations would look like. But here's what we imagine. I have to thank the Microgrid Subcommittee again. Having this expertise has really helped us think through this. The first is a DPW transfer station microgrid project. This is very much focused on reliability and resiliency because this is where Brian Joyce and the DPW team, this is their base. And that team is responsible for clearing our roads of snow and making sure people can get to the warming stations. So it's a critical part of our emergency response. The DPW offices and trucks are there. This is where our buses are parked. And this is where our solar energy array is. Right now, when the town has an outage, that solar energy array shuts down. The National Grid has a switch, it shuts it down, and even if the sun is out, those solar panels will not produce energy. We would like to explore changing that. When we have outages, which as you know we do, we would like to be able to use that energy if it's being produced to either charge electric vehicles, charge potentially electric buses, charge a battery that then could be used, maybe even a mobile storage facility. 1 megawatt system can fit on, oh, Steve, help me. How big does that truck have to be to hold a 1 megawatt or even a 500 kilowatt?
Oh, half a tractor trailer is about a megawatt.
Okay, so half a tractor trailer. If we had storage, mobile storage at the site, we could then use that storage to be able to supply schools or town buildings, and it would be clean, and it would be energy that would otherwise go wasted. And so that's a possibility. We don't know if it can work. We don't know if it's economic, but we've asked for funding to be able to look further into that. So that's
Just put in perspective of what a megawatt could feed. If everybody knows the Hingham shipyard, besides peak days, that runs under 1 megawatt. So if you look at the entire shipyard, including the residential, that is under a megawatt. So if you would put a megawatt in perspective, that can carry quite a few homes in the area.
That's right. So it also could potentially down the line be used to deliver energy to neighborhoods or communities that otherwise can't be serviced. And
Correct.
that's a possibility that we would look at here, but it's making use of the solar energy that would otherwise go wasted. And that energy storage could help us to shave peak load through some of the Clean Peak Energy Standard, that program that's currently moving ahead. Steve, you raised your hand.
Oh, yeah, a question for Steve maybe. So a battery the size of half of a tractor trailer would be able to pump out power at 1 megawatt rate. Well, but how much total power, how many megawatt hours would you get out of that battery storage?
Well, it depends on what size. So you would go, you would go with a 2 hour, 3 hour, 4, 5, or 6 hour battery. So again, if the load is a megawatt, the battery should work all the way up to 6 hours minus degradation. But if the load serving is under a megawatt, it would last longer because it's the full power flow wouldn't be at its full potential. Because remember, AC only flows when there's a load. So if you don't have a megawatt, it would go longer than say 6 hours.
So this 1 megawatt battery that you were mentioning, would that be able to supply the Hingham shipyard for 6 hours? Or
yeah, so let's just say a nice fall day.
King size bed here.
So
You want to go to the guest bedroom?
Steve, you need to hit mute. We don't see you, but we can hear you. There you go. Okay, so go ahead, Steve.
Okay, so long story short, so on a nice fall, spring, what a day, a 1 megawatt, 6 hour battery would last, could last up to 8 hours at full discharge.
And for purposes of Osgood, this that would be more than enough to be able to cover an outage for the entire Osgood load. We wouldn't necessarily need that. It also, we've done some comparisons, could be the equivalent of a number of different town buildings, including the teen center, the library, potentially police and fire, although we have another plan for police and fire. So there's a lot of potential flexibility. Again, we're exploring this hopefully as part of the study grant. The second project we looked at is, one last thing about DPW is in the future, as we move forward with electric buses and electric buses advance, there might be opportunities for the town to lease some electric buses, and that whole fleet could be used as mobile storage, potentially mobile storage. So it would serve multiple purposes if we went forward with leasing buses. Again, part of what we want to explore with the DPW site. The second site on phase 1 is the Elm Street Microgrid project. We talked about this. It's the Cohasset Housing Authority, as well as the police and fire station. The police and fire station on a standalone basis could have solar on its roofs along with the battery that would allow it to be completely self-sustainable. But you also have Harborview there. Harborview also has some roofs that if the state wants, the state owns those buildings, we could pursue solar. There might be additional backup generation. The police department has a gas-fired generator in its basement. Might want to take it out of the basement because of the flooding, the floodplain right there. I don't think it's necessarily sustainable or resilient to have that there. But so there's a bunch of different configurations we could look at. Steve and Mike helped put together some nice approaches to what that microgrid would look like. Again, we would like to pursue studying that and thinking about that. But Chief Sylvia and Chief Quigley are very supportive of putting solar panels on the roofs of the police and fire department. It makes sense. It's great resiliency, it's reliability, it's backup. It could work in conjunction with the gas-fired generator. It could work in conjunction with the battery. There's lots of opportunities for that site as well. And it does not cross the public right of way. So we would be able to provide for both police, fire, and potentially Harborview if we're able to move forward with that. So that's the second demonstration project that we would like to study and learn from. Both of those would be really simple. Understand the microgrid operations, that'd be the objective, and how there's operations, communications, the field, the function. We try to get electric charging, electric vehicles moving forward. So there's lots of opportunity to create a lot of lessons learned with those two sites. And I don't know if there's anything else Mike or Steve would like to talk about on those two sites, or Michelle, who was critical to submitting that proposal. But if not, we can move on to phase 2.
Yeah, I think you did a great job covering it.
Yep.
Okay, we have a lot more detail on this, by the way, because we went into additional detail for each of these projects. So if we do get the study funding, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that.
Anya, do you know if National Grid has any type of electrical vehicle charging station program? Because at Eversource, part of our grid mod initiative is we were able to recoup like 45 million to spend on electric vehicle charging stations, where we pay for everything up to the charging station. Do you know if they have anything like that?
So Michelle might know, because we've been able to get 6 charging stations for the town.
Oh, cool.
And I think that was through, I don't know if that was directly with National Grid or through MAPC, funded by National Grid or what, but the town is in the process. I guess, Michelle, do you want to talk about the
Sure.
3 stations and where those are going?
Yep. So we applied for 4 new stations. One is going to be housed at Recreation and Library. The other is going to be in the town parking lot. We're going to have a 3rd at the high school, middle school. And then the 4th will be actually, so the Recreation Center, you'll have 1 in the back parking lot and 1 in the library parking lot. So that'll be 2 more sites. It was funded primarily by National Grid. However, there was additional monies owed by the town. And we just applied for green communities to cover that cost. So
Oh, that's awesome. Cool.
It is awesome. And Cohasset has a demographic that would makes us a cluster, a potential cluster of electric vehicles. As you know, we have a lot of Priuses. We've had a lot of Priuses. We have Teslas. I anticipate that this is a town that's going to have a lot of electric vehicle adoption early on. And so one of the pieces of phase 2 is understanding what do the existing assets look like? What's the fleet, not just of the town. We have some electric vehicles, but also of the town residents. And we can obtain that data, mass data through the property tax information. The property taxes or real estate taxes that the town collects. So we're going to look into the electric vehicles. We'd also like to understand who has backup generation and whether or not they have on-site batteries or fuel cells. This may be done through a survey. It might potentially, we could do it through the census. We just have to explore this, but I think it's important for us to take a tally of what assets does the town already have, private or public. Steve Wenner. Oh, Steve Wenner, you might be on mute. I see that you raised your hand.
I'm wondering about private homeowners with solar arrays on their roof. How would they integrate with a town microgrid or mini grid or muni grid?
Right. So the originally, I think we were thinking maybe they could inject back into the grid. I think currently our thought is they would simply be a load shedding opportunity. We can look at load shedding. If they can self-sustain and they can provide their own energy, then that's that much less that the rest of the town has to invest in. So there might be some incentives or credits that can come into play. There might be going forward some type of credit through National Grid. If you have that type of backup generation, there might be something the town can do. But I think that from a microgrid perspective, we would like to understand who has solar energy arrays and are they self-sustaining? And if we needed to shut them off, would they be willing to let us do that? And what would they want in return? And I think that's a critical part of designing the muni grid, because the more load that we can shed, the less we have to invest. And so everybody wins. Everybody wins. And
So one thing on home solars, just to this point, IEEE 457, all inverters, microinverters have to shut off when utility power is lost. So in a microgrid scenario, inverters would have to be reprogrammed to stay on when there's a loss of power. So you got to keep that in mind. And there's a lot of talks out there about with microgrids and keeping the solar on, and that'd be a change of philosophy with the IEEE standard. So
that's the same with battery storage too, I presume.
Yeah, correct. You use battery storage. They install with like an automatic transfer switch to island off during an outage, or to peak shave, or to reduce energy at night. So you are correct, Steve.
Okay, so if a homeowner wanted, I presume he could sign on to the microgrid or muni grid, so that in case of a power failure, he could continue to operate his solar array and his battery storage as part of the muni or mini grid. Huh? Is that the idea?
That would be part of it. And I think we'd have to look into that and make sure we're not violating certain rules. Again, I don't see these as insurmountable. I think it's just a different way of doing business. And I think that we would also look at Solarize Plus as a means of being able to implement more of this. So your next adventure, Steve, when we're done with community aggregation and looking at Solarize Plus, could be a critical part of microgrids and mini grids and muni grids.
Okay, thank you.
That's a nice pitch for what you're going to do as soon as we get our community aggregation done. Phase 2 also looks at, I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit. Phase 2 looks at town land that could host the assets. Again, trying to make sure that we don't have to cross existing rights away. This is a map of the town land in red. And we would also, here's some potential candidates for microgrid projects. This is what the $3,000 funding could help us look at with respect to the town buildings, what might be potential microgrids outside of the Elm Street microgrid or the DPW transfer station microgrid. And so there's lots of potential public-public, public-private, private-private. And part of the private-private might be talking to the Chamber of Commerce, helping to educate the large load areas, the SHAWs, the stop and shop, the medical, the TOD area, and help them look at the options economically. Again, potentially through Solarize Plus, maybe by introducing them to some of the private developers who can help them. I think some of them already are in conversation with private developers about solar, and there are some ideal microgrids with respect to those commercial assets in the town. So those, we've sort of circled where those potential microgrids are, and then with red, those are town building opportunities, and that the town building opportunities is what the $3,000 grant that hasn't been approved yet, but hopefully we're getting this from MAPC. With the approval of the Department of Energy Resources, we would be able to look at those and rank those. One opportunity, for example, is the town parking lot. Having, you know, if we're going to have outages when people have electric vehicles, this is a problem. It's not just about heat, and it's not just about lights, it's about transportation. And I think people will start to panic. So if we have downtown charging stations, a whole lot of them, or if we have canopies in the town parking lot, this might be an opportunity to deal with that type of resiliency, reliability. And there might be some in the future advance vehicle to grid or vehicle to home opportunities where, in fact, Dermot O'Connell, who grew up here, he is with a place called Mobility House that looks at exactly these opportunities. So there's lots happening out there that we can tap into. Our third phase is identifying the downtown mini grid assets. This is looking at a connection over public rights of way. This goes to what Steve mapped out 4 years ago. So this should look familiar to everybody. We have a perfect demonstration project sitting here. And so we would work with National Grid to figure out how we put this together. There might be canopies on the Mbta Station, which is very close to the landfill solar array, that could be feeding into the downtown area. The schools on Sawyer Street might be able to have backup generation. School roofs might be able to host the solar panels. We know the high school can do that. And so we would look at a downtown mini grid that would really make sure that in the downtown area, all of the town assets, the emergency response assets, the energy infrastructure, emergency infrastructure assets, that can get serviced, as well as everybody else who's on that. And with that, the lessons learned would be, what does that look like? How do you aggregate these different assets, including the generation at the home, including some public and private opportunities, and how do you manage all of that when the lights are out, but also to help lower the cost on a day-to-day basis. There's opportunity now with storage to be able to control your demand and your peak demand, and that can have a lot of savings for a system like Cohasset. Phase 4 would look at not just that downtown mini grid, which is on the screen as the red, but would also look at natural breaking points with respect to switches that could divide up the town. And some of these might just be a pure load shedding. You put 2 switches on the big homes out here, and maybe they self-sustain with solar, with battery, with backup generation, with other assets that they have. And that allows for the rest of the mini grid to be able to operate. Or maybe a tree goes down on Forest Avenue, aptly named, and we can isolate that part of our system until it gets fixed so that the rest of the town is able to continue operating. The entire town itself can be islanded, make it into an electrical island with 3 switches, actually even 2, because that 3rd switch, which is on South Main Street, is basically a dead end. There's something tricky about that would require some additional investment to integrate. But that's a very manageable option at the end. So that would be the entire mini grid. What are we talking about? This is not now. This is not now. There's a lot of steps along the way, a lot of lessons that need to be learned, and a lot of not just exploration, but even action that needs to be taken before we can get to this point. So I'm about to go into next steps. Was there anything that anybody else wanted to comment upon before we wrap up this presentation? I appreciate everybody's patience.
Can I ask one question, Tanya?
Yes.
The clarification, so this is for the record, Pat Gooding speaking. The issue about crossing public ways, the franchise rights, how has that been overcome by Eversource versus, you know, it seems like at least initial discussions with National Grid, that seems to be still a gating factor. So maybe Tyler or yourself could speak a little bit to how do we get around that as an issue? Is that just a matter of creating a new model, or are there legal implications to that?
Yeah, I'll start and let Tyler talk. So we can't get around it unless we physically get around it. So we can connect on town land. If we have a connection over town land that's not crossing the public right of way, we can do it. If we want to connect Harborview to a backup system that also services the police department and the fire department, there's no public right of way. It's just a driveway. We can do that. So there are ways to physically get around it, but as far as a business model or regulatory structure is concerned, that's where I'd love for Tyler to share a little bit about what Eversource is thinking and what the potential is. This is, again, a nut that has not been cracked yet.
Yeah, so, you know, speaking from the utility perspective, we obviously don't want to lose our franchise right, and, you know, we don't want, you know, other customers, you know, basically feeding other customers through the public way. I know we do have areas where we've allowed a customer to feed itself through the public way. Like, I think, I want to say like Harvard and maybe MIT and maybe like the Mbta area, which is like the Longwood Hospital area. I think they have, they feed themselves through the public way in a couple spots. That's a little harder to stop, you know, with getting support from the DPU. So, you know, that may be an option if we wanted, you know, as long as the town fed itself and didn't include other customers, you know, that probably has a chance of maybe getting through. But, you know, the utility wants to be part of the microgrid. You know, they want to own and operate it. So I think by including them in it, I think is probably the best bet and the way to make it the most successful. That's my thought on how I think to approach it. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thanks, Tyler.
Oh, okay.
So next steps, you know, this is where Cohasset is. We've participated in the Municipal Vulnerability Planning Program. That gives us the opportunity to ask for study grant money as well as for action grant money. And there's some action grant money coming up June 11th. There's a plan to continue to harden our grid and assess how we can look at microgrids. So we're pursuing that with the amazing help of Michelle and the town. We have begun adding distributed energy resources like the solar energy array on the landfill. We would like to add more. It makes economic sense. There's no reason not to do it. If we have sites in town that can support that, we should pursue that. And when we talk about potential solar projects and the warrant related to this will be important. And then generators. Let's recognize we're already doing our own little mini grids with generation, and maybe we can convert that to a cleaner, more perfect power approach. And then rapid recovery. There's still programs to be developed. So this is where we are. I think at this point, if there are any questions from the audience, everybody's been great. I hope this will be great viewing for folks, the back and forth, the questions and answers. But if there's any final questions, I'd like to wrap this up and put it to the Alternative Energy Committee proper to see if there's an interest in accepting this approach and this plan that's been prepared and submitted by the Microgrid Subcommittee. All right, I'm going to stop sharing. All right, great. So we're at this point, without any more questions, I'd like to entertain, I guess I'd like to see how people are feeling. Would anybody like to make a motion to accept this approach, this conceptual framework, for purposes of exploring ways to use microgrids for reliability and resiliency in the town?
A motion to approve it.
Thank you, Patricia. Patricia makes a motion to approve it. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thanks, Steve, for your second. Is there any discussion?
I want to say, Tanya, great work on putting this all together. It's so detailed and informative. Well done.
Fantastic presentation there.
Thank you, everyone.
Really impressed.
Yeah, I'm very impressed with this.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah,
great
well,
job.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the help that we've been getting from the members of the subcommittee. You guys are awesome. All right, any other discussion? Great, so we've had a motion by Patricia Gooding, a second by Steve Winter. We've had the opportunity for discussion. At this point, all in favor, you'll need to say your name. We have a roll call vote, so I'll say your name, you then have to say your full name, and then aye or nay. So Mike Schmidt.
Mike Schmidt, aye.
Tanya Bodell, aye. Patricia?
Patricia Gooding, aye.
Steve?
Steve Winter, aye.
Mary Jo?
Mary Jo Larson, aye.
Bill Fusco?
Bill Fusco, aye.
And did I miss anybody? All right, so the motion passes unanimously. On behalf of the Microgrid Subcommittee, thank you for approving this. This gives us the opportunity to now take this to a broader public discussion and start presenting it to the different committees, including the Board of Selectmen. And Carrie, again, thank you for being here and participating in this live.
My pleasure. I'm so impressed with that presentation. That was fantastic. And the substance was amazing. So thank you. And I can't wait to see how this plays out.
Great. Well, a lot of work still ahead of us, but I think we at least have a plan and we can see the end goal. So that really gives us a good context for the next topic on our agenda, which is solar. So the first is related to town sites to lease, whether or not it is worth going to the town to ask for permission to lease some sites related to, for example, phase 1, or the potential microgrids that we talked about as part of phase 2. Is it too early? Is there a reason to do it now? The answer is there is a reason to do it now. And there's also some benefits to doing it now, although we could also study it and wait. So we want to discuss that. And then we'll talk about the landfill production. We've got great news there, and anything we know about the Mbta Station opportunity as well. So I guess why don't we start with the landfill production update. And this is normally Bill Fusco's contribution in bailiwick. And Bill, I don't know if you've been tracking this, but we hit a great milestone this past week.
Please share.
$150,000 in savings.
Fantastic.
That's great.
Yeah.
Energy array on the old landfill. It's incredible.
Wow.
So everybody,
It really is.
applause for our solar and our
Bravo,
sun.
bravo.
It's really
Those
good.
are the types of savings we want. I will say in 2011, it was about green. It was about being green, not just green for the environment, but also green in saving money. We've now proven this out. And I think that gives us some opportunity to go before the town again, because there's another type of green, which is the ability and go, meaning that we have power and reliability and resiliency. So we now have 3 value propositions that additional solar can provide to the town. We can save money, we can be good for the environment, and we can improve the reliability and resiliency of the town, especially in this broader context of a microgrid. So this is, it's just been great. Palmer Capital deserves huge kudos for being able to implement and implement, and now operate that system. And they are a joy to work with as well. So what more can we do? There are town sites that we might be able to use, and there are private sites like the Mbta station that we might be able to use. And I guess let's talk about the Mbta station first, then we'll talk about the town sites and potential warrant articles tied to the town sites. So Mbta station, I know Steve Girardi, you had originally been approached on this. Do you want to just give us quick background and whatever you have as an update on what that opportunity was or might be?
Or could be.
Could be.
So I have not heard from them. They kind of went very silent, but it was a proposed 1.2 megawatt solar array canopy on that entire site, and they are gung ho to do it. MBTA obviously wants them to do it because they do get money, rental payment for their parking lot, so it's a kind of a win-win for them. But as for the company itself, I have not heard from them in, I would say, it had to be before Christmas. Last time, actually, it was actually just after Thanksgiving. That's the last time I spoke with them. So,
And could you talk about, for the benefit of folks who don't know what a canopy is, can you talk about what a canopy system looks like and why, for example, the MBTA parking lot or town parking lot might be the ideal location?
So I know everybody's familiar with the ones in Hingham. They do provide a lot of shade, help lack of less snow on the vehicles. It actually reduces MBTA's facility costs of snow plowing, etc. Also, MBTA does get a rent payment. I don't know what that is. That's between solar company and MBTA, but it is substantial enough where they're allowing them to rent or lease the land for 20 years. So it actually comes down to almost the same cost as doing a roof mount commercial solar. I think the price is in around $3.25 a kilowatt installed, and they're proving a lot of good. You have a lot of work. I know we had a presentation a couple of years ago at the AEC from industrial engineering, the folks that did the ones in Norwell. I think that was the first one in the area. I think they actually look nice for what they are, and the electrical side is very clean and less space savings, and they are nice. They are kind of cool to look at.
Now, what's interesting about this is Chris Senior, as a town manager, could enter into a long-term contract without town approval. I mean, I think he would want to make sure the Board of Selectmen approved it, but the town manager, the town has the ability to enter into an energy contract, including a long-term contract, as long as it doesn't include the lease of town land or town assets. So to the extent solar canopies were built on the MBTA parking site and were competitive, the town could purchase that energy and potentially negotiate to get the physical delivery of that energy in the event of an outage or for purposes of the microgrid. So that is a potential asset that we need to continue to pursue because it's physically there. And I think given what we've just talked about on a microgrid, might be preferable to a virtual arrangement where the physical location of the solar energy array is elsewhere. Steve, you raised your hand.
A question for Steve. What did you hear about the difficulty in putting up the canopy array in the MBTA lot there? What was the hang up?
For the installation?
Yeah, I mean,
When they were,
was it a regulatory thing, or what was the problem?
Just for the installation of them, the installation went pretty quickly. For anything else, I can't really can't say much. But
I mean, I heard 2 years ago that MBTA was going to be putting in the canopies on all their depot lots, including Cohasset. But then I subsequently heard there was some delay because of some legal issue or something. But I don't know exactly what that was, why they haven't proceeded. I thought at one time it would have been completed by now.
Yep, yeah, on that, at least for the one, I know for the one in Cohasset, they were actually into the interconnection agreement with National Grid. But for the rest, I don't know, and I really can't. I gotta kind of chop the blocks right there for me right there, and Tanya probably would understand.
Yeah, no, I think, Steve, there's in addition to the physical implementation, there's the financial off-taker. And if net metering is full, which it has been, then it doesn't make economic sense for somebody to be the off-taker. And so I think that's something to realize. There is a new program that just opened up, Smart 2.0, and that's a critical program for us to take advantage of. 1,600 megawatts of additional net metering through that solar program is allowed. And normally what happens in National Grid's territory is that gets used up in Western Massachusetts because the land's cheap and it can get built at low cost. That doesn't help us. So if we're able to get the town to agree that we can lease some of the rooftops and pursue that, and it makes economic sense, we can take advantage of that Smart 2.0, which it has just opened up or is opening up and is going to move going forward. Otherwise, the net metering can get filled up and the economics won't match out. So that, I think, has been part of the problem. There's now a new window of opportunity that has opened up, and I think part of why we're going to talk next about a potential warrant article is to take advantage of that. Another reason to try to have the town understand what we're trying to do and approve a lease of town property for solar as well as microgrid equipment is because the federal investment tax credit is ratcheting down. It's already ratcheted down from 30% to 26% of the total investment cost. And next year it'll ratchet down again to 22%. And in 2022, it will go away. So this is a critical part of helping the economics work. And the difference between now and next year is the difference between the town being able to save money with solar on the school roofs and not being able to save money. So it's that important. And that's why we need to move quickly. So I'm going to just share my screen to talk about a memo that I distributed, which will be part of our record, to everybody today. And this was following the discussion with the Board of Selectmen last night. I was invited to join to talk about a potential warrant article where we would look at town buildings that we'd like to put on, town buildings or town land that we'd like to put onto the grid. So I'm going to open this. Can everybody see this memo?
Yep, we can see it.
Perfect, thanks. Basically, the attachment C of this, well, this memo provides background about what the opportunities are and gives a little bit of summary that we've already talked about. There's two ways to approach it. One is, okay, let's examine the potential sites in the town that could host solar and hire somebody to come and study those sites and tell us which ones are feasible, which ones aren't, what it might cost, whether or not we should proceed. That we are doing, and that we have received potentially funding for, we hope, going forward. There's another approach, which is what the developers have said, which is don't bother with the study, make us do the work. If you can get the approval from the town to lease these sites, the rooftops, the developers put it out to bid, and the developers have to do the research, and they have to think through, is this not a viable site? What am I willing to look into? What am I willing to bid on it? And so that's an approach that lets the market inform us about what the town sites may or may not be able to do. It's best if the town approves the lease in advance. Why? Because there's a timing issue. If you don't have the lease approval, we're not going to get it until the next town meeting, special town meeting in December. At that point, the window of opportunity to get the 26% investment tax credit has closed. Potentially, the Smart 2.0 program has been filled. And so any putting out a request for a proposal without the pre-approval of the lease may not get us a market price, a truly competitive market price. There's going to be risk built into that that we won't be able to get the approvals going forward. So I think to be taken seriously, and if this is the approach we want to take, which is let the developers decide and inform us about which sites they want to develop that the town owns, we should go to the town to ask for permission. So what sites might we want to look at first? There's 4 sites, I think, that are prioritized based on the conversation we've just had, and also the fact that the school roofs have been something we've been looking at for a while. The schools are some of the biggest load that the town has. So if we can get the schools, which include our emergency response center at Osgood, includes the warming station as well, and the gym. Yep. Steve?
Oh, sorry about that. I thought it was on mute. I'm sorry.
That's all right. If we can get solar on the school roofs, we not only help the microgrid concept, but help with the reliability and resiliency and the emergency response. That is something that the state and other grant funding programs are looking to help municipalities achieve. So it's a great benefit to the town if we can move forward with that. So these are the 4 sites. There are some additional sites we could consider, but I think these were our priorities. Site 1 and 2 should look very familiar to you. Those are the phase 1 of the microgrid plan, the DPW transfer station, the police fire stations, and then site 3 and 4 are the schools. The Cohasset Middle High School, we received town approval in 2011 to lease the roofs for purposes of solar. That, according to town council, is outdated. We cannot use that as a basis for leasing the property because market conditions have changed. Technology has changed. And so therefore we have to go back to either reauthorize or to ask for an expanded approval of not just the roof, but why not take advantage of the new technology that exists and see if we can potentially lease some of the land at the schools for storage, for example, or for electric charging stations, for example. So that is something we need to think about. What sites do we want to propose as part of the warrant? Thanks to Steve Girardi, we have the site number with the assessor map. That's important. We can identify what is the purpose of the lease. Is it just the solar energy array, which is what we did in 2011, or is that so 2011 that we also want to look at potentially solar canopies, energy storage facilities, electric vehicle charging stations. You know, as I started to draft some of the language and tried to stop at solar, I thought, you know what, let's just put it all in. And then if we decide we only want to move forward with solar, we can cut things out. So in this memo, there's a red line version of potential language that would cut out everything except the solar. And then who gets to receive the energy? The town, obviously, directly, if it's feeding into buildings, which is not the case at the landfill right now. We could get it through net metering. I think that's an important thing if we can get into the Smart 2.0 program. And then maybe there's a third party. If we are providing charging stations at the landfill, at the transfer station or at the schools or elsewhere, you know, does the town want to charge for that? Or if we're using that energy in other ways through a microgrid, do we want to make sure that the town has given us permission to sell that energy to a third party subject to some type of regulated tariff? We'd have to figure out how that works. So there's also easements. I don't want to have to go back and ask for easements if we move forward with this. And then the objective. The objective is about what we've talked about, being green, for the environment, reducing the electricity cost to the town while improving reliability and resiliency. So those are the components. If you put that into language for the warrant, that memo has potential language. It has not been reviewed by council yet. I wanted to at least come forward to this committee to get a view on what we should proceed with to push forward on warrant articles. Should we try to go for all 4 sites? Do we want to do it for just the solar, or do we want to have a multiple part warrant article, which makes it more complicated? I understand. That looks at the additional solar power as well as an energy storage facility and associated equipment that could be either fuel cells or batteries. or electric vehicle charging stations that could provide electrical energy to the town or a third party, plus an easement to allow the developer to get there to install the equipment, plus a perpetual or temporary easement for the benefit of the town for purposes of telecommunications and electricity, or a combination of the above. Do we want to give ourselves flexibility as we move forward with some of these studies and as technology advances to be able to take the opportunity as we get that? Are we able to ask the town to give us that flexibility, recognizing that the Board of Selectmen will have to approve this at the end of the day? And not just the Board of Selectmen, even though it's not listed here, all of the other town controls are in place. The planning board, if there's a potential infringement of wetlands, the Conservancy Commission, what is it? Conservation Commission, thank you. The if there's a capital investment that's required, capital planning has to approve. So there's lots of breaks that could slow things down, stop it along the way, but I think that's safe and that should give comfort to the town. So that memo, which was distributed today, apologies, because it was based on the conversation with the board last night, has potential language. And I guess the question for this committee is to discuss what would we as a committee like to propose for warrant articles, recognizing that we are 2 weeks out from the deadline, recognizing that the more complicated we make it, the less comfort there will be, and yet recognizing that our plan for a microgrid that we just approved, there's a lot of opportunity to do great things for the town if we can get the permission.
So Tanya, we also have a question here from Corey Evans from 313 North Main Street.
Yes.
He's asking, are there federal funds or state programs that surrounding energy storage that are expiring soon? He understood that solar projects have deadlines. Is there a similar deadline for these other projects?
So yes, some of the grant funding, once the money's gone, it's gone. So there's a lot, not a lot, but I think $20 million for the MVP action grants that could be available this year and may not be available again. I think this the subcommittee and I am concerned that if we go into recession, some of the funding will dry up, so that even though it's available now, could be available in the future, it won't be available going forward. So there's funding opportunities as we speak that could, if we don't use it, if we don't bend down to pick up that money that the federal government has thrown onto the ground or that the state government has thrown out, somebody else will, and then our town will be the one paying for it. So there's opportunities now for funding, grant funding that are now. There may be some in the future, but we don't know. There's also a new program called the Clean Peak Energy Standard, which is going forward. That allows National Grid to give a credit associated with energy storage. The concept is by having energy storage, you can charge with renewable energy and discharge during the peak hours, and you get a credit for that because you're helping the entire system. That program could help pay for energy storage within 3 to 5 years. And I know part of the reason for that program that would apply to Cohasset is because towns like Hingham and Hull, who have their own electric light company, they are moving forward with storage, or they're looking at storage because it makes economic sense given where storage is today. So we have that opportunity through the Clean Peak Energy Standard, but it is a limited opportunity. Once that gets filled, it's filled, sort of like the queue for solar. Once it's used up by others, we lose the opportunity. But that was a great question. I don't know if there's anything that Steve or Mike want to add on this.
Yeah, we had the past 3 years, we had great success with peak shaving at Hull Municipal Light Plant. We brought in a 2 megawatt diesel generator, and we were able to hit the monthly transmission peaks and the yearly transmission peak. And I think last year we saved like $140,000 after paying for the generator rental. So very successful. And I know it's different for us because we're shaving what we purchased from the grid. I'm not sure about how it works with National Grid, but yeah, we've had great success with it.
The problem is right now, it's like our streetlights. If we as a town invested in that storage and did the exact same thing that Hull did, the benefit would go to National Grid in the current no regulated tariff to send that benefit to us. So the Clean Peak Energy Standard tries to remedy that. Steve Wenner, you raised your hand?
I'm a little confused. If the town were to lease, say, the school roof, we'd be leasing it to a developer?
Correct.
And then wouldn't they own the solar array, and we'd have to have a power purchase agreement? I'm a little confused.
No, you're not confused at all. That's exactly how it would work, which is...
Well, then how would we get net metering? I thought you only get net metering if you own the array yourself.
No. We don't own the landfill array, and we get net metering.
Well, I thought we just got a power purchase agreement with a discount electricity rate.
That's true, but there's no load at the landfill. So we have to have net metering in order
Oh, okay, I see. All right. So if
that load.
part of the load is consumed at the point where it's generated, say at the schools, then yeah, okay, that school would be net metered. Okay, I understand. I'm sorry.
Nope. Yep. So we would lease it. Now, the other reason to lease it to a private party is because these tax credits are tax credits. And if you don't pay taxes, you don't get the tax credit. So the town, as a municipality, generally doesn't pay taxes. And because we don't pay taxes, the tax credit doesn't have value for us. So the reason to enter into a contract with a third party is because they can they can capitalize on those tax credits, and it helps to reduce the cost of the solar so that we can get a lower price for energy.
Okay, thank you.
But we can't acquire or dispose of assets of the town without going through a lengthy process. This is a process to protect us and the town's assets. And the first part of that process is the people of the town have to approve the disposition of the asset or the lease of the asset. So we would have to take this to either town meeting or a special town meeting. If we don't take it to the town meeting that's coming up in June or whenever it happens, we've already been told by developers it's going to be too late if we have to wait until December to get the lease. At that point, they lose the higher investment tax credit, and we may not have anything left in the Smart 2.0 queue that would give us the net metering credit. So there is a time issue happening now for purposes of solar. We've already talked about, thanks to the great question we got from the audience, the timing issue on grants and funding, which are happening now. The town of Cohasset, because of this committee, is in a great position to be able to capitalize on this because of Michelle as well. And so if we wait, it just might not be available. And we did experience that after 2011 and 12. Things dried up, the queue was filled, there was no opportunity to get net metering credit, didn't make sense to go forward. We were able to, because of Palmer Capital, take advantage of that 2011 approval once things came back up and we were able to move forward. But remember, that was approved in 2011. The contract was entered into in, I think, 2015. And the solar energy array on the landfill did not start operations until August of 2018. So these things take time, and it's best to have flexibility to respond. So we can move forward with one or the school sites. We have to go to the school committee and take their lead. If they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. But I think it behooves us to go to them and explain the situation. I think site 1 and 2, given the approval of the microgrid plan, it makes sense to try to get town approval up front on that and to try to do it for the entirety of the components of the microgrid, not just solar energy array. But if we think we should just start small and go for the solar energy array, for police and fire, and then DPW buildings, which would be relatively small, about the size of a house in both cases, then we could do that too. And it wouldn't be hard to do that. There's an example at the end of potential language. Again, a lawyer like Durensis has to look at this. But there's an example at the end where you could just, you know, just strike out anything that's outside of solar. You'd still want the easement language in there, so we don't have to go back to the town, because that requires town approval as well. But otherwise, we could just go solar. So I open this up to discussion by the Alternative Energy Committee. What do you think we should try to propose? We are coming up against the potential deadline, depending on when we ultimately have our town meeting. But we have meetings lined up with advisory committee. We have Brian Host. Thank you for joining us, Brian Host from the Capital Planning Committee. We have meetings set up with the school committee, and the Board of Selectmen have given us permission to proceed with presenting a warrant article to them. So we have the ability to go and socialize this and move it forward. We have to defer to the schools, I think, on the school, what the schools want to do. But I open it up. Steve Wenner, you had your hand.
I don't see any disadvantage to going big here. I don't know why we want to restrict ourselves to just solar, and then with the idea that later we have to come back with another warrant article to expand it. I think we should go big.
Go big or go home. That's what he says.
Yeah, that's right. I might suggest try to.
I agree with Steve, and I would like to just also elaborate on that. Is I feel as though if the various committees, the Board of Selectmen, agree on the plan that we've just agreed on, and this is the means to execute that plan, right? It makes it feasible. So I think they go hand in glove, and I think we should propose to go big. If we have to back off, then we can do that.
Tanya,
Yes.
as a non-ace.
I'm sorry, Steve. Mike Schmidt is next. He raised his hand.
Oh, sorry.
Mike,
Steve.
and then Steve, you're next.
Wait your turn, Steve.
Oh,
My question is it an all or nothing? Are these sites individual in the warrant, or if the school says no, does this whole warrant article fail because of one site?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The way I drafted it, again, I'm not a lawyer, I just play one on TV. But the way I drafted it, I have each site separate with different parts tied to different potential microgrid equipment. And each article allows for the roofs and or certain parcels, which would allow us to put energy storage on if that's what we want to do.
Okay, I mean, if the schools don't hold us up with the other two sites, you might as well go for everything, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice because it's part of phase one, right? It's
Yeah.
all thought out. It gives us the opportunity, if we do get the grant, study grant funding, we then can act quickly on that. We could even move forward as it is. There's money, help with energy storage. If we had approval to put, for example, solar panels on the police and fire department roofs and pursue a battery that goes with it, those buildings could get round the clock self-sustaining power, not just emergency situations, but also reduce the potential cost to the town, and it would pay for itself. So there are, again, great opportunities here. The big challenge, I'll be honest with you, the big challenge is the roofs. The school roofs, the police and fire department roof, they're basically all ready to be replaced. They are, almost all of them are 20 years old plus. The schools, we were waiting, thinking, okay, they're about to come to the end of life. Let's replace the roof, and maybe we can still squeeze in the ITC, maybe move it up a little bit. My understanding is the state has come back and said the roofs aren't 20-year roofs, they're actually 28-year roofs. So the state won't give partial funding of the roofs if we replace them in advance. That said, we have in the past put out a request for proposal that required the cost to include a one-time take off, let us replace the roof, put it back on. So the fact that the school roofs are now, 8 years out from replacement, I sort of feel like it's a moving target. Let's just do it and see what the developer says. And when we talk to the school committee, we can explain why we think that's the right approach. On the police and fire department, they're already replacing tiles every storm. Tiles are blowing off. It's time to replace that roof. But this is where opportunity exists. Maybe the Department of Energy wants to try Tesla solar shingles, and those roofs would be perfect for Tesla solar shingles. So if we could get the roofs paid for and put on solar and combine it with funded energy storage or an investment by the town that pays for itself in 5 years or less, because of the Clean Peak Energy Standard, it's just a win-win-win. So there's, again, lots of opportunity happening now. And the more flexibility we have to pursue this plan, especially on those first 2 sites, I think the better. Anything else? Anybody else? I mean, I'd like to hear from others. Steve,
Yeah.
Yes.
So I took a ride down today to the Wilcox Center. Honestly, that would be number 1 on my page if I was in your spot for solar canopies. There's 3-phase power. There's a pad mount transformer. National Grid probably either has a license, lease, or easement with the town already. I kind of did that freeware software, and I was able to fit a 350 kW grid tie solar system in that parking lot. And then you look at the benefits of the parking lot. Like take for instance the winter. You have a lot of activities for this, the seniors. That's less salt, less ice, less falling. It's south-facing. If they need access to the pool, they just probably go through the CYBSA fields. I'd put that number. I would literally put that number 1. I think it's a win. All the infrastructure's there. They can come off that transformer to a reclosure, to another transformer, to a switch, to the metering gears, and out to the solar canopies. It's like that'd be the easiest one to do. I would pursue that.
And it's part of our downtown mini grid. It's part of our downtown mini grid right there.
It actually is. It's actually in that area where the jail is going to be.
And it not only ties to reliability and resiliency because that's a warming center, but it also ties to our most vulnerable, our elderly, who use the Wilcox Commons.
You could do it. Actually, you could do a small microgrid for that area too. So I think that's actually I really took a good look at it. I designed it in my head how I would do it. I know National Grid might be different, but it's be the same philosophy. I really would put that in there.
Okay. How do other people feel about putting it in? I think we can start taking some votes, but I want to finish the discussion because I'm cognizant of the time.
So,
Suggestions?
first off, thanks very much, Steve, for doing that. That sounds great. And I also would vote that we go big. And I need to step away. I'm running a little late for something else that I committed to do. So I definitely go big, and thank you very much for everything that's been organized. It's fantastic.
Okay, so Mary Jo, why don't we, I guess, take a vote? So it sounds like we have a consensus to go big. So do I have a motion that in all of our recommendations, subject to the school committee's guidance with respect to the schools, the alternative energy committee would propose warrant articles that include not just solar, but all potential microgrid equipment as identified?
So moved.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Patricia. A second. Is there any discussion? We've already had discussion.
Could I offer an amendment? Could
Okay.
we amend to also include the Wilcox Center?
That's going to be our second
That's Steve
vote.
suggested.
That'll be our second vote. So the first is whatever we propose
Okay,
is going to be for purposes of the microgrid equipment, not just solar.
okay.
Okay, so good. I'm glad you're chomping at the bit. All right. Any further discussion? All in favor? Quick roll call or vote. Mary Jo, could you say your name? And
Yes, Mary Jo Larson, aye.
okay, Mike Schmidt,
Mike Schmidt, aye.
Steve Winter,
Steve Winter, aye.
Tanya Bodell, aye. Patricia Gooding,
Gooding, aye.
And Bill Fusco?
Bill Fusco, aye.
All right, great. So passes unanimously. The second one is whether or not we should add another site, which is Wilcox Commons. Thank you, Steve, for looking into that. We had some discussion. Do I have a motion to include an additional site, which would be Wilcox Commons?
So moved.
Thank you, Mary.
Second.
Do I have a second? Thank you, Patricia. Is there any discussion? Steve, you did a great job describing that. All right, we need to do another roll call vote for this. Tanya Bodell, aye. Mary Jo?
Mary Jo Larson, aye.
Patricia Gooding?
Tricia Gooding, aye.
Bill Fusco?
Bill Fusco, aye.
Steve Winter?
Steve Winter, aye.
Mike Schmidt?
Mike Schmidt, aye.
All right, this passes unanimously. Mary Jo, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry this has gone on so far. All right, so I think we're ready to finish up. Let me go back to our, I'm going to stop sharing, go back to our agenda. So our agenda. So we've now talked about the town sites to lease. We have motions and approval to go forward. Are there any other projects that, just cognizant of time, if we haven't made great progress on any of these, or if you want to just put it forward as new business or something to discuss going forward? Is there anything else on other projects? And identified here are potentially micro hydros, small wind turbines, wildflowers, Solarize Plus, etc.
I proposed a couple of those things for discussion, Tanya, but in view of the time, I say we defer that to the micro hydropower, et cetera, to another meeting topic.
Patricia, I think it's important to look at these, that technologies are changing. We need to continue to keep apprised and think through things. Is there anything anybody else would like to say about other projects? Has anybody scattered wildflower seed at the landfill yet?
Steve, I thought I saw you up there.
Be free. All right, so if there's no more discussion on this topic, we will move on to the final. Is there anything that has come up since we posted this agenda, matters not reasonably known in advance, that anybody would like to discuss? I will raise one thing, and it's administrative. I have talked to the council on call at the town about our role in the Alternative Energy Committee and potential conflicts of interest. For example, some of us are very, very involved in the energy industry. Steve is very involved with his group, which has helped to move things forward in this town. And I asked in my own context, for example, if there was a petition to put something on the warrant, would I be able to sign it? Would I, as the chair of the Alternative Energy Committee, be able to create a petition to put something on? It was a little bit insightful, but he basically cautioned me in my role as the chair of the Alternative Energy Committee, or as a member, an appointed member of the Alternative Energy Committee, about making sure potential conflicts of interest and potential alternative hats that I might be wearing don't mix. It's not just about a conflict of interest, it's about an appearance of a conflict. And even if speaking on the town meeting floor, he suggested, since we are not a committee that does policy, we would need to get permission from the Board of Selectmen in writing. We should do that if we wanted to err on the side of caution to make sure that we could speak to these issues. So I just raised this because it was, I wanted to make sure there weren't conflicts. I think we all need to think about it. If you want to call the lawyer of the day to ask about your particular situation, he would not comment on anybody else's situation or a third party other than mine that I could describe to him. But I think we have to be careful. And as a result, I have asked Chris Senior and Kevin McCarthy if they think this entire committee should be designated as a special municipal employee. We are employees of this town because we work in a voluntary role and we are subject to employee rules. There are potential conflicts that could be created. So I've asked whether or not this entire committee, as the advisory committee, is given this designation, whether or not our committee should request and receive the designation of special municipal employees. That's an ongoing discussion, but I just wanted to let you know that we are looking at that as an option to make sure those of us in the industry don't have an appearance of conflict. We know people who could bid on this. It's good that we know people who could bid on this. We can pick up the phone and call people and say, hey, what about this technology? What about that technology? I think we just have to be cognizant that we're in positions that could be perceived in negative ways. And we just need to keep everything very clean. Is there any discussion on that?
I'm sure this hasn't come up before with like a, well, I guess like a sewer commission, water commission. I mean, you're going to have technical experts on most committees, right?
I think it's a question of it. Are you advising or are you helping to implement? Or are you helping to set policy? Right? These are different roles that committees can play. If we're just advising, we're advising. But as we move forward with a microgrid, it seems like we're going to be more involved with procurement and action and helping develop contracts and working with Michelle to implement, if our experience with the landfill is any indication. And that's where I started to think we should probably just make sure we're not conflicting ourselves from potential work, because we can see how much value there is in having that expertise on the Alternative Energy Committee as well as the subcommittees. All right, is Corey still on? Our audience participant? Thank you so much.
We have Corey and Jennifer Madden on.
Oh, Jennifer Madden, thank you for joining us. I don't know how much you got to hear, but I'm hoping that you got to get enough of a flavor of how we're thinking about the warrant articles. This will be recorded, so if you want to watch the whole thing, and most certainly I'm going to suggest to the committees we're going to meet with that they take the time to listen to this meeting. I appreciate everybody's participation on this. So before we adjourn, is there anything else on matters that otherwise anticipated? All right, thank you everybody for your amazing participation and working together and expertise. We appreciate it. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Patricia. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I think to be proper, we have to do roll call. So we'll go through Tanya Bodell, aye. Mike Schmidt.
Mike Schmidt, aye.
Patricia.
Patricia Gooding, aye.
Steve Winter.
Steve Winter, aye.
Bill Fusco.
Bill Fusco, aye.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We are officially adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice
Good
job.
night.
Say bye.
Thanks. Great meeting.
Bye, everybody.